Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our study on the life of David. Today we are in lesson 19, entitled David and Absalom, Part 2. We are continuing our study of the rebellion from David's son Absalom. We studied in our last class about the conspiracy and rebellion of Absalom, how Absalom had stolen the heart of the people from David, including one of David's advisors named Ahithophel. And David and his family flee from Jerusalem. They get out of there. Well, chapter 16 ends with Absalom receiving advice from Ahithophel to sleep with David's concubines on the roof of the palace. He wanted to make himself a complete disgrace to his father, and all of Israel would see that this revolt is completed, that they would see this sin. You think about what Nathan said to David all those years ago in chapter 12 and verse 11, when he says that he will lie with your wives in broad daylight. And all of Israel is saying this is no little incident now. Reconciliation is out of the question between these two. Well, chapter 17 opens of 2 Samuel, and Ahithophel is giving his counsel to Absalom. And his plan involves taking his troops upon David when he's weary and exhausted and killing the king. Verse 2, just kill him, murder him. It tells you a lot about Ahithophel, where David felt guilty in cutting off the robe of the Lord's anointed. Ahithophel, by contrast, had no problem with striking down and killing David. What's even more interesting is verse 4, that Absalom was pleased in all this. This plan involved ending his father's life, and it tells us that at this point, Absalom cared nothing for David. He didn't care at all for his father. Those actions certainly showed it. The fact now that he is pleased with his plan to kill David, to kill his father, just confirms it. Just absolutely confirms it. How did it get to this point? How did they get to a point where a son not just steals a kingdom, but is content with even killing his father? How does it get to this point? Well, it started with an inactive father who did nothing regarding Tamar's rape by Amnon. David didn't do anything in regards to that event. And afterwards, there was a distance between a father and a son. It came about between the distance between David and Absalom. David, who didn't speak to Absalom for 5 years. It's a reminder here that a failure to repair broken relationships inflicts wounds that may never heal. Pride can keep us from taking that first step. And what a different picture could have been painted if David had simply gone out to welcome that son home and to make things right with him. But instead, he distanced himself from him. Time and distance do not heal all wounds. Sometimes we say that time will heal all wounds. Put a little space, they just need a little space. Time and distance don't heal all wounds. They don't make things better. In fact, it can dig ruts and make it even harder to get through and to get over. You compare this picture of Absalom coming home to his father, and you compare that with the prodigal son. That even before he got home, his father saw him and ran to him and welcomed him and embraced him. Certainly, there must have been talk about rules and expectations, but at that moment, he's home and the father rejoiced, and there was this rebuilding of the relationship. That didn't happen with David. Didn't happen with Absalom. Absalom came home for 5 years. David didn't even see him, didn't go to him, didn't even talk to him, nothing. Time and distance don't heal all wounds. It can make things far worse. Here's the thing. Can you imagine if you were given the chance to have lunch with David tomorrow? What would you ask him? What's a question that you would ask David? There's probably a lot on the list, but we might say, well, tell me about finding Goliath. Tell me about the giant. Tell me about that scene. What it was like to go down there. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? Tell me about the time they had to run from Saul. Tell me about those stories. What it was like. What you felt. Tell me about the Psalms. What was behind some of these Psalms that you wrote? And yet, imagine growing up in that home. in the home of David, the giant slayer, the psalm writer, this amazing king. And yet you look at Absalom. And Absalom, we have no prayers recorded, no psalms. He doesn't see God's favor. The only time he mentions God is in deception to David in chapter 15 and verse 7. The faith of his father didn't seem to carry over or have an impact on his son. Isn't that something? We look at David as a spiritual giant, and in many ways he was, and yet his son had none of those characteristics that his father had spiritually. None. We say, man, I would love to sit down and learn from David. I would love to sit down and just pick his brain, to get a glimpse of his heart, to hear about his faith and the trust he had in God. And yet here is his own son who didn't have that. It just tells us so much about the importance of sharing and unfolding and connecting the faith of your children, the faith you have with your children, and helping their faith come alive within them. David did not do that for Absalom. Well, Ahithophel gives advice to Absalom. Take 12,000 men, pursue David that night. He knew that David had fled. He knew that he had fled in panic. He knew that he did not have the time to gather up strength. Even though David had the Cherethites and the Perethites and 600 men of Ittai, the Gittite, with him, and Ahithophel had 12,000 men. David being suddenly caught in the open by such an army, such a grand army that Israel had, he would have likely had to have surrendered or have been overcome. He would kill David. Only David is the plan. Ahithophel's plan will only kill David and will bring back the rest of the people to you. Verse 3. And so from a military standpoint, it's a great plan, right? It's one that had potential for success. And so Ahithophel portrays David as this weak, feeble, vulnerable old man. Well, starting in verse 7, Hushai gives advice. Hushai, the friend of David. Hushai, who was sent to confuse and to slow down Absalom, to mess up, to gum up his plans. And so he begins by saying, don't take that advice. Don't take Ahithophel's advice. Remember who you're facing. The exploits of David are legendary. I mean, Absalom certainly would have known the stories and what a fighting force David and his mighty men are. I mean, Hushai likens them to a bear robbed of her cubs. He says, you've angered David. You've made him upset. You have hit the hornet's nest. Don't you face them in his wrath. Don't you forget who you're facing. This is David, the David, a man of war. He won't be hiding with the people. He will be one step ahead of you, hiding in the cave. If you rush into battle now, you're going to lose. And the heart of the people will crumble, and everyone in Israel who knows about your father, they know how mighty he and his men are. Verse 10, they know how strong he is. And so his counsel was that Absalom was to gather a large army and lead them into battle. Now, just paint the picture. Imagine being the head of this mighty force, and you lead them triumphantly in the battle. He's just stroking his pride. He says, with such a great army, we will surely overcome David. Even if he hides in a city, we'll pull the walls down. That's verse 12. And so Hushai plays on Absalom's fear as well as his ego. The fear is, don't you forget who David is. Don't be duped. This is David the giant slayer. You know him as David the father. This nation knows him as a war hero. And you will see that if you go out and face him. But then secondly, on the ego. Oh, come on. Go send an army at night. No, you could ride out ahead of them and lead them triumphantly. Absalom, this is your chance, man. Take the kingdom. Show them how great you are. Well, Absalom takes Hushai's plan. And when Ahithophel hears about this, that his plan is not taken, he goes back home, he sets his house in order, and in verse 23, he hangs himself. Perhaps he was thinking that his days were numbered with Absalom. Most likely what he knew was that a long-term war against David wasn't going to work. The longer he waited, David would get stronger. He would gain support. And the longer they waited and the stronger David got, Absalom had no chance of defeating him. And so he knew that if this plan was really going to be carried out, Absalom's days were numbered. And when David got home, he wouldn't survive. And so he takes his own life. Well, so after Absalom takes Hushai's plan, he wastes no time sending word on to David. Hushai wastes no time sending word to David. And so he tells Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, his plan, and they tell their sons Jonathan and Ahimaaz. So these names are a little difficult to pronounce. Ahimaaz, I believe, is his name, verse 17. And so things almost became unraveled for this plan because their intent on the secret spy sending messages back and forth, it almost got foiled because there was a young boy who saw the two men, and Absalom's servants came looking for them. But we might say by God's providence and goodness, they were hidden by a woman, verses 19 and 20. Well, they come. They come and they quickly tell David that they needed to cross the Jordan River because Absalom was going to come. And David comes to Mahanaim and receives help from his friends, verses 27 and 29. And they bring him fruit, they bring him provisions. They're helping David gather up his strength. Well, Absalom set his men at Amasa over the army. Amasa is Joab's cousin. So Amasa is set over his army, over Absalom's army, and they're camped out in Gilead, and they're ready for battle. So you have Joab over David's army, you have his cousin Amasa over Absalom's army, and things are gearing up. Then comes chapter 18, 2 Samuel. Chapter 18, the battle prepares to commence. David divides up his soldiers, a third with Joab, a third with Abishai, that's Joab's brother, and a third with Ittai, the Gittite. The people would not allow David to go out with them. They told him, we're 10,000 of us. Be ready to help us from this city. And so they didn't let him go out in the battle, and that was very wise. It was a wise move. But before the battle begins, David has a plea in verse 5. And you can't fault him for it. The plea he charged to his generals is deal gently with Absalom. Not only did they hear this, but all of the people heard this charge. He is asking the generals, spare my son if at all possible. Though Absalom had caused great pain and shame and disgrace upon David, it was his son. It was his boy. You can't fault him. It makes you think as you read this that perhaps David had envisioned returning to Israel, perhaps with Absalom imprisoned, or under some kind of a watch or supervision or punishment, something. But David did not have death in mind for his son. It was not how he saw this unfolding. In his mind, there's a way we can make this all happen, where it all goes back the way it should be, and Absalom stays alive. We can spare my son. So they go into battle, and the servants of David defeat Israel. It's not a surprise. 20,000 men are slaughtered, are killed in this battle. We're not really told who died from what army, but David's army is seen in this chapter as this triumphant force. What happens, though, is that in the midst of the battle, Absalom is fleeing, riding on his mule, and he gets caught under this tree. Because remember, one of the features of Absalom is that he had this long, flowing, thick hair. And so his long hair gets caught in the branches as he's trying to get away. Well, a young man tells Joab, hey, I just saw Absalom. He's hanging in the tree. He's caught. And after Joab asks him, why did you kill him? The young man shares what David said. Catch this. The young man says to Joab why he did not kill him. He says, David said we ought to protect his son, to protect him, not to kill him. And so Joab hurries over to Absalom, takes 3 spears, and he thrusts them into his chest. And his 10 servants finish killing off Absalom. That's verses 14 and 15. So the question is why? Why did Joab kill Absalom? It's not that he didn't know the command. All of Israel heard it, and literally right here he is reminded by this young servant boy not to kill him, of David's orders. So why did Joab kill Absalom? Well, it could be that he understood that as long as As Absalom was alive, others would be in danger. The lives of others would be in danger so long as this young man is allowed to be alive. You also notice verse 16. In verse 16, after his death, Joab blows the trumpet to end the fighting to minimize the damage done. In other words, once Absalom's dead, the rebellion's over. This is it. It all centered around one boy. This wasn't a civil war started by all the people. It started with Absalom. He was the one who instigated it. He was the one who started it. He was the face and the head of this rebellion. And so if you strike down the head, it's going to go away. And that's what happened. Absalom is killed. They don't have someone to lead them then. They don't have a follower. Ahithophel's dead. Who are they going to follow? And so now that their leader is over, we can just stop this. The battle's done. Joab was perhaps also thinking for David's reign as king, the king and peace of Israel. So he was thinking of David as the king, not David as the father. This is the best thing for David as king, not the best wishes of David as a dad. Well, upon the death of Absalom, Joab sends a Cushite to tell the news to David. And Ahimaaz begs to tell David the news, and Joab lets him. And so he runs ahead of the Cushite. Ahimaaz shares the good news that the battle is over, but David is only concerned with one detail. How's Absalom? How is my son? Ahimaaz did not know the answer to that question, but the Cushite's following. He's coming along. So the Cushite comes, and he shares the news. Your son Absalom has been killed. And David just breaks. He breaks. He weeps, saying, my son Absalom, would I have died instead of you? He goes to the chamber over the gate, a place where everyone who approached or passed through the gate could hear him, and he just wept. And he wept. It reminds us that Absalom's death was never part of David's plan in any of this. He wanted reconciliation with his son, and he wanted his son alive. We might say, well, that's too late. Too late. I mean, where was all this 4 years ago? Where was all this when Absalom came home? All those 5 years ago. When Absalom was in Israel those 2 years and David didn't even see him. We think of the words that we say oftentimes and associated with death, all the things left unsaid. Well, that's just piling up on David now. Because it's too late. Well, from David's weeping and mourning, his supporters found it near impossible to celebrate. David continues to mourn and to grieve. And Joab, his commander, his right-hand man, comes and he speaks to the king. And though he had lost his son, because of his reaction and his behavior, David was in danger of losing the kingdom. And Joab realized that. Joab realized the danger of what was happening through David's reaction. And so Joab realized, in the grand scheme of things, it never would have worked to let David live, or to let Absalom live. And so he comes to David and he reasons with him. He says, instead of honoring those who put their lives on the line for you, to save you and your house, you as this king, you're bringing shame. You're bringing shame to them as if they've done something horrible and something despicable. David was forgetting that there were other lives to focus on than just Absalom's. What about his own life? What about his other children, his sons, his daughters? What about his wives, his supporters, his soldiers? David needed, as a leader and a king, to put on a brave face, to unite the nation, and to try and put back the pieces of this broken Israel back together. This was not a time to publicly grieve. This was a time that you show a brave face, that you suppress those emotions, and that you do the best that you can to bring a united front. Just bring everyone back together. Something awful has happened. There's been a great victory. It's time for us now to come together. There's a lesson there. Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 4 says there's a time for mourning, or time to weep, and a time to laugh. Time to mourn and a time to dance. There's a time for grieving. But I need to be sensitive that I'm considering the lives of those around me. And in my mourning and in my sorrow, am I neglecting those who are in my life around me? David needed to pull his family and his nation closer together and to mourn alone with God. His carrying on would have divided the nation. It's not to say that he couldn't mourn. It's natural. David needed to mourn, but he needed to consider the timing in the situation. There's also lessons here of the wounds from a friend. While Joab certainly has several character flaws, one of the things you see here at this moment is that he's concerned about David and he's concerned about the kingdom, David's reign. And so he came in and he gave a hard and critical rebuke to David in a time that he really needed to hear it. You know, there are some who drift far from God in times of sorrow, and there are some who draw near to God. And the difference, it's not the issue. It's not the times of sorrow. The difference in the outcome is what's in the heart of that person. Do you have the faith and the trust of God to lean on the Lord in the hard times? Because without that faith, without that trust, when hard times come, you're likely to crumble, to drift, to fall. Here, David had to face an ugly moment in his life. No parent should have to bury a child, and this is the third of David's children who have now died. And David is grieving. In some sense, he's grieving because something awful has happened. Right? I mean, there's the death of his son and this horrible situation within the nation of Israel. This kingdom, this strong kingdom, shattered through this rebellion. But you have to wonder if perhaps in David's heart, when he's able to sit and reflect in his own counsel, in his own time, if everything from his sin with Bathsheba is flooding back up and thinking, this is me. God said this would happen as a result of my sin, and I brought this. I brought this sin. I brought this shame. I brought this pain upon myself and my family and this nation. Sin comes with terrible consequences. It affects more than just us. And David had to live with it. But as we will see, this is not the end of David's story, and nor does it have to be the end of our story either. David will continue, and he'll continue to do good things. He'll continue to walk with the Lord and to end his life on a good note. And that can be the same with us as well if we continue to walk with God even through our valleys. If we leave from our pit of sin and shame seeking God's forgiveness, if we continue to walk with God and serve him, the end of our life can be far better than the earlier moments of sin. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't start walking. And if you walk through this valley of pain and hardship, of suffering and death, you're not alone. You're not the only one to have done so. Lean on the Lord. Go and drink deep from Psalm 3. You are my shield. You are my portion. You are my shelter. And I will lean on you. Thank you so much for studying with me. I hope you'll come back and you'll join us again. We have a few more classes in this study on the life of David, and so I hope you'll come back and join us for those future lessons. Till then, have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.